We are now going to make our forms randomly shuffle the order of the trials that the participant gets. So, to do this, we're going to make a couple classes in JavaScript. So let's go to our scripts, create a new document. We're just going to call it trial order.js. Okay, I'm going to open this. Okay, so our first class is going to be called trial. It's just going to contain some basic information about each trial. So let's see, so let's create a constructor. And the constructor will take the page name, so like ptrial1 or ptrial2. It'll take the index, so this will be the number that we give the viewer, to tell it which image to use. It'll contain a debrief message, and it will contain a debrief method. So the difference between the message and the method is the message will just be what's shown on the main debrief page, but then if they click a button on the main debrief page, it'll call this method, which might highlight certain abnormalities, or it might just take them to a page. Okay, so let's save these parameters in our class itself. So this dot page equals page, and do the rest for the others. Okay, we will also want to time them, probably. So let's have a start time, this dot start time. And even though this will be a number, we're going to start it out with a string called unset. And this will just be good for debugging later. If we fail to set start time, it will obviously be wrong because it'll just say unset rather than 0 or some number, which could actually be meaningful. Okay, so this dot end time equals unset, and this dot duration equals unset. Okay, now let's make another method for this class called start. And so before we would just go straight to the trial. Now rather than doing that, we will call this start function. So let's actually put some debugging messages in here. And then start the timer. So we're going to use this function viewer get uptime, which is basically the time starting from 0 since the viewer loaded. So this will be the same times that the viewer uses when it makes its own logs. So we're going to have an end function, but this end function will do more than just stop the timer. We're also going to pass it in an index for this trial, and we're going to pass it in an object name for the object which is going to be organizing all these trials. And the reason we do this is because when the trial ends, we're going to populate various fields in the debrief page, as well as that end of trial page. So let's add our debug message. Okay, and let's stop the timer. And let's subtract the start time from the end time to get our duration. Oops. Okay, now let's use this $sign function, which basically gets an element by its name. This is specified. This is defined in the common.js file. So the message name will do the end of trial message first. Let's call it the page. So this dot page, and then plus to concatenate these two strings together. End message. That's a good name. Okay, and we're going to change the HTML in this particular object. So inner HTML equals just some message, similar to what we had. You have completed trial plus I. Okay, so it's worth mentioning in JavaScript these indices are going to start from 0, whereas our messages in HTML we typically started them with 1. So obviously if you say they completed with trial 0, I don't know, they might not like that. So let's just increment I. So now if this is the 0th trial, so the first one, we'll increment it, and it'll say trial 1. Okay, but we also want to change the debrief message. P debrief. Ooh. That should be in quotes. Plus I. Okay, so the reason we're not using the page is because the debrief messages are going to be ordered from the first one they encounter to the last. It's not actually going to be associated with the page itself. Okay, so I'm going to start with a message, and I'm going to be using single quotes because I'm going to be using double quotes later when I'm actually adding HTML. So let's just start with trial plus I plus a space plus the debrief message plus space, and then let's add a button, so like an HTML tag, so the less than sign button on click equals. So when we click it, and this is why we're using single quotes, is because I'm going to use a double quote here, plus, and we're going to use I minus 1 because we want the actual index now, plus a single quote in parentheses. Forgot to actually call my function. So we're going to use this object name now. So object name. And then this object will have a function. So let's do a plus, single quote. The function will be called debrief. And then opening parenthesis, opening parenthesis. Forgot a plus sign over here. Okay, there we go. And then we're going to pass in our index, and make sure this is in parentheses because otherwise it might hate this minus sign, because we're using plus signs to concatenate strings and we're using minus signs to subtract this number. So subtract the number in parentheses and then concatenate it with your string. Oops. Let's see. So this is a button. And we'll just call it, the button will say view in it. Okay, so let's just do a quick look through here. So we start the button on click. The on click has an opening quote, and we did forget our ending quote, so that would be bad. Okay, and then the object name This would be dot debrief, open parenthesis, number, closing parenthesis, semicolon, type button. Okay, so that looks good. It might work, or it'll tell us exactly what our error is when we try to run it. Okay, so this is all we need for the individual trial class. So let's make a second class. This will organize our trials. So let's create a constructor. And this constructor will take in the last page. So it will always go to the next trial until there are no more trials, and then it has to know what the last page to go to is. So that would be our comments page, but we're going to just call it the last page. And we're going to need its object name. Okay, so we're going to need an iterator, just a number that we increment, to know what trial we're on. So this dot I equals 0. Let's save our last page. Let's save our object name. And let's create two arrays. The first one is just going to be an array of indices. So that'll be numbers from 0 to however many trials you have. I only have 2. So it's going to be the numbers 0 and 1. Whoops, this dot, let's call it order, equals 0, comma, 1. And these are square brackets indicating the array. Okay, so let's create another array. And this will be our actual trials. Okay, so the first trial, new trial. Okay, so we need to give it a page name, so p trial 1. And this was associated with the index, the image index 1. And our debrief message, it had no tumors. And we need to add a function which gets called whenever they click this button in the debrief page. So function, no parameters, curly brace. Okay, we're just going to go to a page right now. So go to page pdbf. These were our individual pages that we had made already. 1. Okay, and that's one of them. So let's make a comma, because we're adding a new entry now. Copy that, paste it. Let's remove the comma because it's the last entry. So this one would be trial 2, index 2. I don't know how many tumors it has for realsies, but let's say it has 3. And its debrief page was pdbf2, I hope. Okay. Oh, let's not forget our semicolon. Could be important. Now, let's create some functions to order our trials. So the first function, let's rearrange our trials. So rearrange, and we'll specify a new order. So if they don't specify a new order, or if the order length is 0, we'll just shuffle them. So if new order equals undefined, or new order dot length equals 0, whoops, 0, 0, then shuffle this dot order. Okay, and the shuffle function is a simple array shuffling function defined in common.js. Okay, and let's see. Otherwise, if they did give us an array, then just replace our order equals new order. Okay, so this allows them to either call this rearrange function and just shuffle, get random page orders, or they can enter a new array, so it would be like this, 1, 0 or something, and actually specify what order we want. Okay, now let's actually make a helper function. So get trial with an index, because our trials will not get shuffled, but order will. So if we want to get the first trial, then we'd have to get the index from order and plug that into trials. So it'll be faster to just make this helper function. So return this dot trials. Opening square brace, this dot order, opening square brace, I, and then close your square braces. Okay, now we'll have a function for actually starting the trials. So start next. All right, let's just create a shorthand here. We're going to get our trial, so let t equal this dot get trial, this dot I. Oh, I forgot my equal sign. Equals. And then we're going to go to a page with viewer. And now I can just use t rather than using get trial every time. So t dot page, t dot index, and then we're going to do the first slice, and we're going to add a fourth argument here. So whenever they go to the viewer, they potentially will be taken to the blocking page first if the viewer hasn't loaded. That's normally fine, but if you try to call a function, so for example, when I start up here, I try and call a function that's specifically tied to the viewer. Well, this function doesn't exist yet if the viewer hasn't loaded. So rather than just calling start down here, which could be bad if viewer hasn't loaded, right? This would take you to the blocker page, and then it would immediately call that function and yell at you because it doesn't exist. We're going to create a callback function. So this fourth parameter is optional, but anyway, we'll definitely want it now. So function, no arguments, and t.start. Okay, so now if it goes to the blocker page, it will wait until the viewer loads, and then it will call our little callback function here. If it doesn't have to go to the blocker page, then it'll just immediately go to our page and call this function. So this just makes sure the viewer exists before we actually call this function. All right, and now we'll want to end our trials, so end. Okay, so let's just end it. This dot get trial, this dot I, dot end, and remember end took parameters, so we're going to pass in our index. We're going to pass in our object name. Okay, and we're going to increment to our index to the next trial. So this dot I plus plus. All right, and there is a special behavior. If you end your last trial, you will want to go to your last page. So this, so if the index, so this dot I, is equal to the length of our order list, so this dot order dot length, hide the viewer, and go to page this dot last page. Okay. And now we want to make this debrief function. And it takes an index. So let's get the trial at that index. And call its debrief method. Alright, and lastly, we're going to get the order of our trials. We'll just, I don't know, list the pages or something. And this will be something we'll want to return back to ourselves so that way we know in what order they did the trials. So get order, lit r, and this will just be what we return. So r will just start out equaling an empty string. For lit I equals 0, I is less than the length of our trial, so this dot order dot length. Okay, and increment I each time. And we're just going to append the page to R each time we loop. So R plus equals this dot get trial I dot page. Okay. And let's also add a semicolon in between them just to make it easier to read. Okay. And now we're going to return it. Ret run. Okay. All right, so now we have to go to our v.html file, and we'll have to add our message areas, and we will have to do a little bit to get these classes used. So let's go here and scroll down almost to the bottom. We'll start at this script tag here. All right, so let's make a variable, trial order, and it's going to equal a new trial order, capital T. Okay, and remember it took two parameters. The last page, I think it was p comments, and the name. So the name we actually called it, so trial order with a lowercase t. We're going to make a string with that name. And this is because we need to call this object later in buttons that we create, so we need to inject this name into those buttons as we make them. Okay, and let's just do trial order dot rearrange. And we're going to make the first trial second and the second trial first. So 1 comma, square braces to indicate an array, 1 comma 0. And I also want to make a version key. It'll be constant, so const version key equals trial dot get order. Alright, so this still isn't ready to be used, but we've made our object, so let's copy that name and go up to the top. And our first page here, we have our little button that quickly went to trials. So now we'll do trial order dot start next. Okay, so now once we click this button, hopefully it'll take us to our first trial. So let's refresh our page. Okay, trial order is not defined on 5:16. Oh, right, very important. We just made our trial order class. Let's actually add it up here in our classes list. So it was scripts.trialOrder, lowercase t. Refresh. Trial is not defined. Go down. 519. Right. I don't know why I called it trial there. It's called trial order everywhere else. Okay. Refresh. Okay, it at least didn't crash. That's nice. Let's go, and it went to our first one. All right, now let's set up some of the other buttons. Okay, so when the normal progression would be to go from the demographics page. So go to the end of your demographics page. And instead of this go to page with viewer, do trial order dot start next. Okay, I'm just going to copy this. And we will want to put this in the end pages. So rather than going straight to comments, because p trial to end now doesn't necessarily have to be the second end page. It could be the first end page. So you want to start the next trial from it. And p trial 1 end. Hey. Oh, I accidentally already added that, thinking that was my demographics page. So up here in my demographics page, that's not my demographics page either. Up here in my demographics page, I will, assuming it's all valid, start the next trial. Okay, and we also want to end our trials. So at the end of trial 1, let's see. Yep, so if it's valid, then we are still going to go to this page. We didn't specify that in our functions at all. So we're just going to add an extra little thing inside the curly brace because we want this only to happen if the trial's valid. So dot end. Okay, and same thing at the end of our second trial. So if it's valid, then end the trial. All right, and before we can end the trial, we have to populate some message areas which don't exist yet. So on the main debrief page, so pdbf main, let's do a span. Okay, and what did we call these? Let's see, so these were pdbf message, and then a number starting from 1. So I will have 2 of these because I have 2 trials. So the ID of this span equals pdbf message 1. Okay, and let's replace our other button with pdbf message 2. Okay, and now instead of these you have completed trial blah 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 messages, we will do something similar. So create a span, and the IDs for these were the page name with end message at the end. So p trial 2 end message. And in trial 1 end, p trial 1 end message. Okay, and maybe this will work. Let's go to the viewer, go to the end, and nothing seemed to crash. We see our message that we made. Go to the next trial, and something crashed. Okay, let's see. Apparently I wrote got to page instead of go to page. So this is on trial order line 61. So let's go to trial order line 61. So just a simple little typo. Okay, and let's see if our buttons work. Debrief for trial 2, debrief for trial 1. So that seems to work fine. All right, now let's try randomizing it. So remember to randomize it. We just stick an empty array or stick no array, but I'm just going to make it empty into our rearrange function. Show viewer. Okay, so this is different from the previous one. Wow, pretty good spread here. That's wow. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, and we should also have, what was that constant? It was version key. Okay, so we can see p trial 2 and p trial 1, which is correct. So this is the second trial, and it was the first one to show up. Let's run through these real quick. Oh, wait, nope. Okay, so now that we should have started and ended each one, I can look at trial order dot trials. And so the first trial, which is actually the first trial, the one with no tumors, it had, let's see, can I look at the rest of this? Okay, so it saved a start time, an end time, and a duration. That's good, that's what we wanted. Let's look at the other one. So at index 1, okay, also start time, end time, duration. Something I forgot, now that our trials can be done in the order where the windowing trial comes first, we need to make sure that we actually turn off the windowing before we go to the next trial. Otherwise, our long window is still applied, and here you can see it really washes out the already windowed image. So to do that, it's pretty simple. We'll just go to the end section of our trial, and anytime we end, we apply shader off. Okay, save that and refresh. Okay, so now do long, and now it's just the regular image. That's all.